You have landed on The Substance. We are three guys thinking critically about faith, culture, and theology. I am your host, Vincent Edwards, joined with my co-hosts, Trevor Aiken.
Yo, what's going on?
And Philip Marinello.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for coming back.
Glad to have you guys back with us.
Or coming for the first time, if this is your first episode.
For sure. All right, so as Vince said, we're talking about faith, culture, and theology, and we're here not just to preach on stuff. I hope, if you're involved in church, you've got your pastor.
Hopefully preaching is covered.
Someone's preaching for you, but we're here to start conversations, and we've got some fun stuff today, but ultimately everything hopefully stirring people up to love and good deeds, because ultimately as we think about these things, hopefully we can talk about it in a way where people are able to hear a new perspective, to consider outside of the perspective they are used to, and to show love to people who think differently than they do.
Mm-hmm.
And also, as we kind of are exploring why some of this stuff matters, maybe along the way, it makes a difference in the world. And that's what we're really...
Exactly.
That's the hope. And we are working on, actually, at the end of the episode, we've got a number of new 5-star reviews that we'll probably read at the end. Have just appreciated getting messages and DMs and texts and stuff. Send us emails, send us voicemails. We would love to interact with that publicly. I don't want to be reading people's private text messages on here. So it's super encouraging to get those. Yeah, we want to start conversations here at The Substance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Trev, what we working on today?
We've got a conversation started today. And so I've been wanting to cover this for a couple weeks now.
I mean, not a couple weeks. I feel like you've been
I've been on
pushing
it for a while.
this since... I feel like this was one of your suggestions when we're
for a topic toss-up.
Hey, we're bringing The Substance back. Let's start brainstorming some topic ideas. I feel like it was there pretty early for you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So within the last couple of years, a topic, you see it on news articles all the time, this idea of cancel culture, and it's something that I think really bears some serious critical thinking, some thought, some attention.
The thinking critically part of our mission statement.
Yeah.
I think I'm looking forward to getting into that. Also, a little behind the curtain here. We've all talked, we're not wildly different. This isn't going to be like a cage match or anything, but I feel like thus far, the conversations we've had in planning the show, we're not all in lockstep. We don't think the exact same thing entirely about this topic, so I think it'll be a good conversation.
I think some of the ideas overlap for sure in some areas. It really just it all depends on where the conversation goes.
Well, so I imagine many of the listener perspectives will hopefully. I hope that we have excellent public feedback.
Yeah,
but
or maybe we'll get canceled.
Ooh,
no, I'm just kidding. No, but seriously. But it's kind of funny because I think some of the different perspectives that we bring to the table is almost inherent to the topic itself, because it's so vague.
It is not clear.
Yeah.
And so it's funny because you'll see news sources and it doesn't matter like the political affiliation. It's one of those things that just
everybody does rail against it.
Everybody likes to hate on cancel culture.
Except Cody.
Except for Cody Johnston of Some More News. And I guess me, so...
Well, no, after you sent me that one, I get it. But I think one of the first ways into this topic is kind of the definition side, because I totally get when people rail against it. I feel sympathy most of the time.
Yeah.
Because... because it is more emotional.
That's a good point. That's powerful emotionally.
Because it's more emotional than, it's not an easily, there's not one standard definition of it, right?
Right.
So when you hear it, you go, what have I seen? What have I heard? What have I experienced? And the things that I think about are more the gleeful, malicious internet mobs ganging up on people doing hashtag fill in the blank is over party or hashtag cancel so-and-so. And it's exhausting.
Yeah.
Shout out getting off Twitter for a little while.
Yeah.
I love Twitter. For a while, Twitter was my favorite social media platform. There's so much good information out there. I'm on Twitter to follow creators who I enjoy interacting with.
Yeah.
But you can't, especially in an election year, you can't get away from just the toxic, like nonsense that's pervasive.
Constant.
So I'm running the Substance Instagram now. I'm spending a lot more time on Instagram than Twitter, and I feel so much better. So shout out for taking a Twitter break. I highly recommend it. It's good for the mental health.
I think that's huge what you're saying though. Like most of the time when people think of cancel culture, they think of internet mobs.
Yeah. That's what when someone says I hate cancel culture, I do think of the internet mobs. I think of like the hashtag gangs, ganging up on people or doxing people, or if it's somebody who has any sort of business venture, they don't like a thing they say, they flood them with like hundreds of 1-star reviews to try to tank their online presence.
Yeah.
And it sucks.
Yeah, I when I think of cancel culture, I don't think of a particular individual or even a particular group of people. I just think like cancel culture was the demand of quote unquote society in a sense. And society demanded the head of this person or group of people.
I feel like it's a little bit like the next logical step in when people used to rail against being politically correct.
Yes.
Because we all have social media platforms to where if a celebrity with a couple million followers gets offended and doesn't like a thing you say, they can sick their millions of followers on somebody if they don't like it. And
like
it's
the
terrible.
Beehive.
Yeah. It's no joke.
What's the Beehive?
Like if somebody insults Beyonce,
it's called the
folks
Beehive, and they are relentless.
Oh my goodness!
You will need to deactivate your Twitter account.
The Beehive
by the
and the Swifties are ferocious.
Oh my goodness!
Yeah,
that's wild. But here's the thing: cancel culture is internet mobs, and I don't know a soul in the world who would necessarily be pro internet mobism.
Well, there are the horrendous people that have YouTube channels who make money off of spreading hate, so they're probably not.
There's probably a few people, but in general,
sure,
you don't see that. But I feel like what I have seen though is, I mean, recently, a major political figure in our country decried cancel culture as like rank authoritarianism, or I don't remember the precise phrasing, but authoritarianism was in there.
Hilarious, by the way.
And you've got the Philadelphia Statement, which has been signed by Al Mohler and Russell Moore and Wayne Grudem and John Frame, that is condemning cancel culture as this like huge like free speech, like end of Western civilization kind of thing.
When did that happen?
The Philadelphia Statement is copyright 2020.
The best worst year.
peak worst year ever. So it looks like it was started in like maybe August of this year.
Oh wow, it's that recent. Okay.
Yeah. And it seems like there's a lot of conservative folks who are talking about it. They talk about free speech, the heart of liberty. I've seen on their Facebook how like critical race theory is against free speech and all this kind of stuff. So it's kind of interesting that a statement against cancel culture is literally trying to cancel an actual academic idea. But
we're for free speech, so shut up about your idea.
Yeah, so shut up about that academic sociology theory we don't like.
Right. We're for free speech, but stop saying the things you're saying.
Yeah. So anyway, we start out with internet mobs, right? And it becomes this thing where everybody's kind of like, yeah, that's off in our culture, like that's wrong. But then it becomes, Western civilization is teetering, and this is against free speech and all this kind of thing. And
like when it becomes an enemy in the culture war,
right? So here's the thing that I kind of wanted to say is that cancel culture, I believe, has multiple components that are bad that you could point to individually, but they're not all the same, and none of them, like I think only one of them really has anything to do with free speech. And the problem is when they all get amalgamated together into this cancel culture, it becomes this amorphous idea that no longer means anything specifically.
Sure.
And so there is no ability to take action on it. Like signing a statement saying we're for free speech and against cancel culture does nothing.
It's the boogeyman.
Yes.
Yeah, it's just a scapegoat. Because I think the idea behind cancel culture, at least in a relative sense, is accountability. Basically just trying to hold people to a point of accountability. If you say something, if you do something, you should be responsible for the things that you do and say. And that's not a bad thing.
That's a great thing.
That's a good thing.
That's the thing that social
Harvey
media
Weinstein stuff, right?
Exactly. No, that's what I was going to bring up. So with Me Too and Church Too and all those, I feel like it was 2017, 2018, where particularly powerful men started to be publicly held accountable, particularly for their sexual misconduct. And that's a good thing, that people have those social media platforms, that it's not just the press, because I mean, newspapers are sadly dying, but the new wave of media is social media, so people can say, hey, and not just throwing out accusations. That's the difference between the internet mob and having a platform to actually say, hey, I have a substantive accusation that I have backup for, and I would like to be heard. Not I'm out for blood, listen to me uncritically, take what I say, and then give me this guy's head, but like, these things need to be dealt with, and my voice should be listened to. That's a good thing.
I think there's an important distinction that you made there, just talking about how it used to be you would have a newspaper that would bring something to light, a journalist would do an investigation with sources, and there is a sense of gatekeeping and rigor that is hopefully there, but the big difference too with that, though, is that if you wanted to fight back against that as a measure of accountability, you have a single guy to target. You've got the editor, you've got the journalist, and you've got the paper, right? So you have something that if you have the power and the ability to, you can put pressure on them to silence it, to minimize it, that kind of thing.
And that happened for decades.
You can't do that with social media. Nope. But what are you going to do? Some Twitter user, tweeted this thing and 30,000 people retweeted it.
Yeah.
How are you going to tackle that problem?
Are you going to threaten 30,000 families?
You can't.
Sure.
You can't tackle the beehive like it.
You super can't. You super duper can't do that.
Don't mess with the beehive.
And I think that's the kind of the flip of the coin on that.
It's a pro and a con,
right? Because you have the idea of accountability, but following right behind that is the question of what is the standard that people get canceled? What causes a person to be worthy to be canceled? It seems to be almost volatile. Like, well, if you say something that I don't like,
I'm going to start a hashtag.
Yeah, we'll start a hashtag and try to get it trending. If you do something that I don't like, and so it's like, who is setting this standard of what's worthy to be canceled or who's worthy to be canceled?
Sure.
And also, as a follow-up, what is being canceled?
Yeah, I was thinking about going there too, because I think that's important. Like, there's what is the standard, but I think even before that, you have to talk about what does it mean to get canceled?
What is it?
And that's where I think I do want to kind of come back around to my statement earlier and give some backing to cancel culture and free speech being two different things. Because when you talk about free speech, you're thinking about censorship. And censorship, by its nature, has a authoritative force, typically a governmental force that is saying these books, these words, these things will not be published, will not be broadcast.
Yeah, you cannot distribute these thoughts, words, images, etc.
Right. Because they are against our society's morals. And every society has certain things that meet that criterion.
100%.
Right?
It looks differently, but you will not find a culture that doesn't have ethics and standards.
Right. That's why there's certain stuff you're not going to find on network TV. That's why there's certain words that you're not going to hear. There's a sense of censorship that exists that can exist and not be bad anyway. But cancel culture isn't even that, because
that's certainly not
a
cancel
bunch of
culture.
People on Twitter have no ability to do that. And I think the only way it intersects is some people sometimes talk about it in hate speech legislation. And I don't see that one tied in very much with...
I think that's pretty heady.
I feel like that's a topic for a different time.
I don't think that's a conversation that regular folks are having.
Right. Because at the end of the day, like, a person who goes out there and says whatever and gets whatever internet mob, they still have the freedom and the right and the ability to say the thing, and then they become a martyr for their cause. And so they get a lot of people, and you've seen this happen in recent cancel culture episodes in the last few months, where you'd have an eminent professor who's got some people who have some ethical questions, and then it's cancel culture, and then he becomes a hero for standing against cancel culture.
And that's
so his
really,
speech. So the point is, his speech is not being restricted by anyone. No one's taking his books off the shelves. No one's making him.
Some people might take the books off of their shelves.
Sure, but no one. But the government is not saying he can't publish.
Yes.
No one is saying he can't get on a podcast. No one is saying his Twitter account has to be deleted. Like,
unfortunately,
he's fine.
Let's say you have this professor who says this thing, and people don't like it. They push back on it, right? And because of the power of social media, people can hashtag, and he can get a lot of backlash.
He can get a lot of pressure from tons of areas.
And that could bleed into areas that typically aren't affected by social media in the past, because social media wasn't as powerful. So then what do we say? Because then people are saying that if you should be able to be free to say what you want to say without having backlash. So it's almost freedom of speech and freedom of consequence to some degree.
Yeah. I was going to say, go ahead and repeat that for a second, and let's meditate on that statement for a second.
I think we're all on the same page with that one.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, but I think that's where you get a lot of pushback on cancel culture, because people are saying this shouldn't exist. You shouldn't have to make me be able to say something and then recant on that if that's what I thought was a good thing to say. Or if the standard is subjective, and in certain groups what I said was not bad, but in other groups what I said was fine. Or
I see that a lot in the
offensive.
In the comedy world.
Okay.
People are out there trying out jokes, especially in non-big like Netflix or Amazon special ways, where they're just in little bars or clubs or whatever. They're just trying stuff out. People go home and tweet or blog and like that hurt my feelings. And like I would imagine, especially if that's part of your job, working out material in public, it'd be pretty obnoxious to have to like deal with getting blown up all the time from people who are enjoying taking offense at the things you say. However, that is not saying you're not allowed to tell jokes. You're not allowed to put out your specials. All your Netflix specials are now off the air and you're not getting paid anymore. It doesn't say that, but that would still be pretty annoying.
Yeah. But this is once again what I'm talking about. Cancel culture takes us on a digression away from the real problems, because the reality is if you say something that offends 30,000 people, then you're probably not doing good in the comedy business.
I disagree in a way, because
the problem is not that people are offended, right? So cancel culture puts the problem on the people who are offended.
I disagree.
Problem is this guy is subject to people who've never heard his stuff or whatever now in this social media age, and social media is so important to so many people, and it's completely unregulated and just running rampant in people's lives, that this guy can just get dogpiled.
I think, and I'm not saying I disagree entirely, I think the biggest gripe of folks who complain about cancel culture that I agree with is about like the purveyors of false, like the creators of dissent. Like the people who are like, ooh, somebody said that thing. I bet I could get a lot of retweets and traffic for my website. Anger and controversy, things like that gets internet traffic. So I think the biggest thing that I agree with is there are a lot of trashy people out there running essentially like gossip trash websites who are seeking to create those things for public figures.
Right. And unfortunately, gossip trash websites are protected by the free speech clause. So.
But they've been around forever. But they used to be 30-page little deals that you'd buy at the checkout.
Sure.
Now they are being specifically and intricately targeted to every American.
Yeah.
Well, and the interesting
every
thing
person,
too,
like globally,
is, in the list of the 7 things the Lord hates is the person who sows up dissension, right? Like the person who sows strife among brothers, right? So we as countrymen, we're all together, and then somebody comes in and starts a fight just to start a fight. The Lord hates that.
That's a good reminder for our politics conversations.
Yeah. But so I'm not saying that that's a good thing that people do that. I'm just saying that what are you going to do? Like, if you're hateful, you can't, like, what's the action item here? And honestly, too, is that actually a core of all of the things that we have seen called cancel culture? Is that what's going on in most cases? And I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, I think that drives home, at least in my mind, that cancel culture, because I know in some respects...
Like, I think those are fringe issues that you're talking about.
Do you really?
I don't think it's at the core of what most things that get called cancel culture actually are. Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. I think what we get at is cancel culture it exists, because I know a lot around the conversation it's saying whether or not cancel culture exists. I think it exists, but I think it's ineffective. And I think that's where you and I agree, and we talked about that, because it tends to focus on the individual rather than the ideas or policies in place.
Well, and I wanted to talk about that a little bit as well, because I feel like a lot of times in kind of conservative circles, we use this word culture a lot to blame individuals for problems that are bigger than just individuals.
Yes.
And it's a way that we express our ultra individualism by saying, okay, I'm seeing this big problem, but all I know to talk about is behavior, so I'm just going to label it a culture because it's a blob of behavior. So we might have cancel culture. We've got cultural Marxism. People talk about black culture. People talk about all these different cultures in negative ways, and try to blame big problems on culture and what it is.
And then when they see individual things they don't like, they can be like, oh, well, that's a product of X culture.
Yeah.
Right.
It's out of here.
And so it also just reinforces this idea that there's no structural problems, there's no policy problems. All the problems boil down to just a bunch of individual actors doing bad things.
Correct.
And I'm not disagreeing with the fact that individuals do bad things. I'm just disagreeing with the fact that that's the only or most relevant problem even here.
And I would absolutely be on board with you on that.
I agree.
But that's not what I feel and think the most when I hear cancel culture.
Well, for sure. Like, and I think that's because it does appeal to emotion, and it is something that is...
And it also doesn't mean anything.
It doesn't mean anything. So I think another thing that we've kind of talked about is, okay, well, what does it mean somebody gets canceled?
Yeah.
Is that they lost their job? Did they lose a gig? Did they get literally canceled from a speaking engagement?
Or is there social media?
Did people just mute them on Twitter? Did people just ask them to say a apology or something? So, what does it mean to get canceled? Have you seen?
Well, I mean, I think cancel culture can be a blend of all of that. Mm-hmm. It can be a blend of somebody losing their job, losing a platform, losing a gig, losing something. And I don't know. I really don't know what that fixes. It's like that person said something and it ticked you off, and so you don't want them to have that thing that they have anymore, or you don't want them to be able to participate in that gig or whatever.
But hold up. Let me push back on that, though, because if I say something at my work and it ticks off my boss, right? Now, maybe at a big corporation, you're all right, but if you're at a small company, that you probably could get fired.
Sure.
Your income could get canceled.
But and that's going to actually hurt you, but nobody's going to talk about that as cancel culture as a real problem. But I bet you that happens way more frequently than people actually losing their jobs from internet mobs.
So does cancel culture only apply to big people, like big names, celebrities, and people who are in the public light?
I would say no. I mean, I think an interesting example of somebody who maybe is kind of item one on the internet vigilantism, internet mobism side of cancel culture was like Rebecca Black with her song Friday.
No, I remember Rebecca Black. What does she have to do with cancel culture?
So what's really interesting about that story, you got to get down on Friday, is her parents got her this, I think it was a birthday gift. They went through a company that allowed them to be able to make a music video.
Uh-huh.
The intention was not, let's put this out there for the whole world. It just happened to go viral. And then she was made fun of so badly that she spent her entire teen years in like serious depression.
Really?
She's talked about that. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
About like all of the struggles.
Didn't she make like a dumb amount of money?
I'm sure she made a lot of money, but like that doesn't matter when you have no friends and everybody makes fun of you.
I thought it was silly and funny, but I didn't think it was like,
It was
what a stupid, terrible girl. Like, I thought most people were like kind of nice-ishly laughing at it.
No, that's not.
Yikes.
That's not how she experienced it. We'll
Yeah.
say it that way.
I
So the
feel-
general feedback was it was like the most hated video.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think it was like.
I know
very
people
disliked.
were like dunking on it. 'Cause
Yeah.
it's funny. It's silly. But not like...
But like you're in
Let's give-
junior high, and the entire world is dunking on a video. Like, remember when we used to make videos?
Nope. And we're not going to talk about any of that so that anybody can,
Can you
find
imagine
any
that
of
going
those videos.
viral and the entire world dunking on
I
it?
don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, no, that wouldn't be great. That would not be great.
So no, you don't have to be super famous to get canceled in that sense, because depending on what you mean by cancel culture,
is cancel
anybody
like
could
receiving any sort of
ganged up on.
negative social consequence?
I don't.
And that's the issue with
I
cancel
don't
culture.
know.
It's so ambiguous.
Because like
it's
when
like what the heck
I think
is
of
it?
like, I mean, Harvey Weinstein's one thing. He's like a horrific man. Yeah, whenever I see any of the movies with the Weinstein Company logo, like I get kind of a sick feeling in my stomach, and I'm like,
That makes sense.
I would rather have them take that title card out of everything that they've ever done. Like, it's rough.
Yeah.
So that's what I think of, like, wishing people would go away who make me feel bad and remember the bad things they've done.
Yeah.
So would you guys say that this is just a bad case of how we use words?
It's not just that we're not using the right words. I think the imprecise words reflects imprecise thinking
100%.
about how we're approaching these issues, because we're trying to lump all these things together, and it's like, oh, well, people are angry online.
Yeah, like internet mobs are different than trying to hold powerful men accountable. But those are two different things.
But there's a problem with your system if people angry online illegitimately about something you didn't do can get you fired from your job. Like, there's a problem with that.
Sure. And that's, again,
somewhere along
the
the line
emotional
that we
thing.
need to fix as a society.
I think of a couple of people, some are more public than others,
And not just get mad
where
at
I
people.
go, man, like, some of these dudes lost a lot. And, like, frankly, not that all their behavior was awesome, but, like, there are some individual cases where I'm like, the accusations were, some of them were false, some were blown out of proportion, some were just like in the wave of the really bad Me Too cases, and they were mentioned in the same sentence as people like Harvey Weinstein. Like, that's not fair.
Yeah.
That's not justice. But accountability is good.
Yeah,
But
I think that's the fear of cancel culture too, and that's why
Yes.
there's so much pushback on
Yes.
it. Is because if I am accused of something that I didn't do,
Right.
Yeah.
it can have pull. But I think I understand now what you're saying, Trevor, about like we should not have a kind of structure that someone can falsely accuse me and it takes.
Yeah.
with no due process.
Right. Like Justin Bieber several months ago had that, where a person said that
Vincent, the huge believer.
No, none of that. I'm just saying, I heard a little something. And he got accused of doing
he were on
something
the Tumblr.
on Twitter. And I mean, he had receipts. Like, he could verify I did not do that. But prior to him saying anything,
He was like,
people were on the train.
Where are you now that I need you?
Oh. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Like, that is, it's not a terrible fear of mine, but like, just thinking about, somebody could just say you did things. The internet, like,
It will come
some
for
of
you.
the stuff that comes up in the political realm shows us that, like, real terrible Photoshop and basic obvious lies can really lodge into people's brains and make them do and say and act on things. I wouldn't want somebody to just make something up about me and then lose my job, have to move, have to like protect my family, and like all these terrible things because of the internet just saying something.
Well, and that's where we really need to, as a society, have a much more serious conversation around what is the place of social media in our society. these are private companies and they affect our entire democracy.
Yeah.
And
in an unhealthy way.
And listen, we regulate stuff. That's what the government is for. It's to give people protection.
Social media played
each other,
maybe the most prominent role in the 2016 election.
Right. And continues to play prominent roles in people's information gathering and the way that they see their neighbor
and the
way they care about their neighbor. And so
bad.
That's what I'm saying. We need to think about these problems in terms of ways that we can deal with them as a society, not just finding more ways to throw hate on one another. Because at the end of the day, there's censorship that we all advocate.
Yeah.
And there are certain things that would happen that we would all be against and we would all dunk on. So the Christians who are, ready to decry cancel culture and sign the Philadelphia Statement may at the same time participate in the boycott that was run against David French. So why should it be the fact people are so easily, in a sense, and firings aren't easy, but for whatever reason, it seems like under certain circumstances, people could be gone.
No, it's the public pressure. If your bosses and your bosses' bosses are being like, this is getting hundreds of thousands of eyeballs on it. Yeah. They're all bad. You're a great guy, but you're not worth all that bad publicity. We don't have a policy in place. We don't have a PR deal. We don't have systems in place to make statements to this mob. This mob is pretty loud and it's hurting us, so you're out.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then for that to mean that person's livelihood.
And we would all say that we're against that.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
Emotionally, that's the plea of cancel culture is out there wrecking all these good people's lives. And that's how it can be emotionally compelling.
But maybe we should have some sort of, and I don't know exactly what structure it would be, but some sort of protections for people. Where, if Google decides, well, this guy is kind of saying something that I think is not feminist enough or is too anti-feminist or whatever, so he's gone. In a workplace where people are kind of encouraged to have this open and public dialogue internally all the time. What's going on?
That is the two-edged sword too of the technology and people being your personal social media, your personal conversations at work. Phones, not to be conspiracy man. Phones are kind of recording everything we say and everything we search and everything we type.
Sure.
For certain folks with certain skills and abilities, our whole lives are open. And if people want to go and decide, I don't like people who think and do certain things, people's lives can get genuinely affected in real ways.
Yeah.
I just think that there's like you said, there's a level of participation in censorship that we all agree on. In I would say, especially in America, there's certain levels of censorship that everybody would say, yes, we shouldn't do that. That's not good or that's not healthy. Obviously, you have your fringe groups who would, go against the grain just cause.
Sure.
But I think I want to say the angle that people, because I'm trying to be sympathetic to those who do say we should not have cancel culture and cancel culture is evil and all of these kind of things.
Sure.
But we have to kind of, and I'm going to say it strongly, we have to kind of recognize our hypocrisy in this conversation because, recently we just had lots of Christians saying, on one end, we're saying no cancel culture. Cancel culture is bad. But then we're saying cancel Netflix because of cuties.
Sure.
And so it's now is cancel culture bad?
or do we do that regularly?
Just using it, or you don't like it when it applies to you? What's the standard again that we're using?
All woke Christians need to get church disciplined out of their churches.
Yeah. It's asking, okay, why is cancel culture okay when you just used it there?
Right.
But it's not okay if somebody used it in a different way.
Because I don't like it when it's me.
Even if you're saying, oh well, there's a biblical precedent for X, Y, and Z. Well, what if there's a biblical precedent for the things that you're saying is shouldn't be adhered, or one shouldn't adhere to cancel culture?
Well, and that's where it does get into like the culture war stuff, right? Because ultimately, what you've got is just competing and dueling moral standards.
Yeah, and not like almost just like ideologies, not even like clearly defined like
real
standards.
Stuff. Right. But the thing is, as a society, we do get to decide what standards do we want to define us as a democratic society. Now, ultimately, like, the reality is the scripture is the truth, and so when we deviate far from that, that's the way truth works. Truth is a description of reality. So if you live with a false description of reality, it doesn't work out too good. But at the same time, though, a lot of times Christians also are applying things that they think are from the truth, but are maybe just from a culture, maybe a fundamentalist culture, but maybe cultural elements that aren't so healthy. And so then we're just, shouting down and we're yelling at individuals when, man, as a people, we could look at these issues on a broader level, on a, like I keep saying, like a more systemic level, and stop blaming people being angry for things that it kind of, like, honestly, in most of the cases that I've seen, kind of makes sense that somebody would be angry about it. Like,
and this is where we disagreed some when you brought up Kevin Hart. I don't know how much time we have. I don't know about that one.
Why not?
The nature of his comments and persona, comedy.
Okay.
And age of that, like, the nature of what he does is try to make people laugh. And if you're like, that thing you said didn't make me laugh and it made me mad. Okay. Like, fine. It's your prerogative to not like it. The amount of time that had passed and his addressing of that stuff already. People like to go find things that they don't like, but they don't be like, has this been already addressed? Has the person who I just now found out that 10 years ago said a thing I didn't like, have they ever addressed that thing that I now don't like in the 10 years since? Like, people don't.
But here's the thing about Kevin Hart. He was saying things about the way he addressed his statements that weren't true. Specifically, he was saying that he had apologized for stuff which he had not done. He had acknowledged that he made jokes in the past that he would not make in the future, and that he gave the reason for that as culture has changed, and so I can't make those jokes anymore. But he never said that these jokes were harmful and wrong. And when you look at a profile picture of someone and say, quote, they are a gay billboard for AIDS, that's hurtful.
What's this joke that he said?
This was Hart. This was one of the things that people brought up on his Twitter. He basically saw someone's profile picture and said
was just
that.
Roasting them?
Yeah, I think so. And
look,
so really,
that's not okay.
He did things that were indefensible.
I disagree in a way. There's polite conversation and there's trying to make people laugh. Like a guy getting up and telling jokes.
And offend people, just say you're sorry. It's not that hard. And when literally it's like, hey, come to the Oscars, just say you're sorry because you said this mean thing.
But somebody
and you're like, no, I won't. Then I'm not sorry for you that you didn't get to go do the Oscars.
That's fine. We don't. But like, and that. So the comedians who I hear talk about cancel culture in a negative way, I feel the most sympathy with, because the nature of their job is to be provocative and to test the limits and to do these things. Like, so what you're saying is, if I understand this right, anytime a comedian makes a joke that somebody doesn't like or gets offended by, they need to apologize? Is that what you're saying?
I'm saying that if you do a joke that a community that you rely on for support deems as harmful, don't expect the support of that community.
What community that you need for support?
Oscar community.
The Oscar Society, in that specific example, said, listen, these jokes that you said, yeah, they're coming up back then, but guess what? They hurt us. They hurt our people. We don't like it. Just say you're sorry. You already said you don't do them. You already said they're in bad taste. Just say you're sorry. He's like, no, I already talked about that. I'm going to talk about it. I'm not going to apologize anymore, even though he hadn't actually already apologized. So
I heard him again. I saw the Netflix documentary.
We can link
and
in the show notes.
I was under the impression that he had I'd read some of the stuff. I've seen some of the videos of him addressing it. It seemed to me, I don't want to let him off the hook if he didn't do it. It seemed to me like he had apologized.
And that's
they're
the
like,
accountability piece as well, because a lot of times people don't even know what a real apology is. They think just saying, I won't do it, means that they've actually said, hey, what I did, I recognize was wrong. I recognized it hurt you, and I'm sorry.
I hope.
And I will do this in the future. That's a full apology.
Think about it this way. You're a comedian. Your job is to be provocative, to test the limits, to make people laugh. Mm-hmm. Somebody says they don't like it, and they feel that they're owed an apology. Typically, apologies seem to have a sense of ownership. When I say things that are not taken well, and it's communicated to me that it might be nice for me to apologize, and if I go, well, I didn't have any ill intent in my heart, I don't think any of the things I said were like maybe technically wrong, and with his stuff, it was obviously a joke. He didn't mean it seriously. He's not... So,
but that's not a magic moral wand.
No. I'm just saying I have sympathy for somebody whose job it is to be provocative, and then you're like, you have to apologize as if you're the bad guy. You're like, I'm not the bad guy here. So, like, by apologizing,
so are racist jokes cool because they're jokes?
What is a racist joke? A joke that deals with race, or a joke that is like hateful and putting down? Because like jokes about race, no, like. But jokes that are like racist and hateful. I
think those are different. Yeah. I think there's a difference between...
Sure.
There's a difference between a joke that talks about an oppressive scenario and a joke that reinforces an ideology that reinforces oppression.
And I think the nature of roasts and comedy, are you saying that in your eyes, and again, maybe it's like relative reality.
A roast you invite.
Yeah, because if you're playing the dozens with someone, then there are two participants in that.
Like if you go into a rap battle and somebody says something mean about you, you can't be like, "Oh, you and your crew need to apologize."
Exactly, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, of course.
Right. So I think what if I'm hearing correctly?
Yeah.
There's an objective standard of what's right and wrong, and at the end of the day, like the conversations that you have, you can't tell somebody you didn't hurt them. Like,
True.
If you said something, you didn't mean it was supposed to be that offensive. You thought it was hilarious.
It might have actually been.
You can't say, no, it didn't hurt. It's like if I punch somebody in the face and I'm like, I didn't even use that much force. Yeah, but their nose is bleeding.
I didn't even connect that hard. Why are you bleeding over there?
It's like, I'm not apologizing for that. It's like, no, you hurt the person. Sure. And you can't say you didn't. So,
and that's the thing. It's like when you get to the point.
Okay, I get the one sticking point. I want you to say this.
Okay.
If you found in the last 8 or 10 years that Kevin Hart had apologized, would that change your mind?
No, because here's the deal. If you already apologized for it and people are like, man, this
He's like, go look
really
up my apology, guys. Like,
and you were like, hey, go look up my apology, but let me reiterate what I said there. Why couldn't you just say that phrase? Let me reiterate what I said there.
I just feel for the man because
Because here's the thing: here's the nature of an apology. If you apologize, you are communicating and you are saying that you understand that your actions caused harm, and now you are caring for that individual. So if you care for that individual and their harm and the harm that you caused, it doesn't bother you to reiterate that care for them.
Which, again, I can see the flippantness of the harm I caused. I just threw out a joke. I'm a comedian.
I'm a comedian. I just made this joke. I don't want to acknowledge the harm I caused, so I guess I just won't do the Oscars this year. Well, man. I mean, you do you, but...
So are you saying...
Tell me if that's wise.
Are you saying that this is an example of when cancel culture works, or are you saying that this is an example of how cancel culture
is ineffective? This is an example of a guy who made a joke in bad taste and got called on it and handled it poorly and lost an opportunity because of his foolishness.
So I think the last part's a little harsh, but I'm almost
not at all.
I'm almost in 100% agreement with that ABCD that you just laid out.
Objectively you could say you think that's an example of wisdom?
No. I guess technically foolishness, like because of the nature of what he does, he gets a lot of people complaining about the crap he says all the time.
Sure.
I feel when the
Oscars call, though.
Yes. But
you got to have a different filter for that.
I do agree, but just the onslaught, I'm sure of. I don't want to set a precedent for now. I'm going to bend to the whim of every time anybody says they don't like a thing I said.
Well, and that's the thing is you have to have moral backbone. You have to have authority, but
and he thought he was doing that, and I do agree that it was a bit foolish. So I guess I agree.
Yeah, and I think that's just the thing. Like these guys, especially a lot of celebrities, people are on the public stage,
but he's also like
arrogant.
A stupid multimillionaire,
and he's not hurting.
No, not even slightly.
And once again,
he missed a dope opportunity, but he's not hurting.
But once again, I think it was by his own decisions, and he's not hurting, and this has nothing to do with free speech, right?
Correct.
This like
because he's not telling those jokes anymore,
right? He's not. He already knew that those were in bad taste, and the other thing too is like it's not something that we actually should even feel bad about. Like the kind of jokes that he wasn't able to tell are not jokes that anyone is edified. It's not any Ephesians 4 kind of speech that we need to be worried about protecting as Christians.
No.
So I'm going to crack the chest open real quick.
All right.
Yeah, let's stop talking about Kevin Hart.
No, so growing up, I watched a bit of Dave Chappelle and Paul Mooney, who Paul Mooney was a comedian who wrote for Richard Pryor. Mm-hmm. And I will say there is a difference in the joke that Kev made versus the jokes that I grew up listening to, specifically because Dave and Paul would take something, one that was relatable, and second that was like you initially had a pretty visceral emotion towards. Mm-hmm. And converted that into something to say, I can think about this thing differently, and I can think about it in a way that brings joy rather than that anger or that sadness.
Because that's their whole job.
Yeah. Right. And so if your aim is to take something that like cancel culture or feminism or Me Too and take that, and rather than having such an emotional reaction that's like you're either saying what's in my camp or you're not saying what's in my camp,
right.
Take that and say, here's a different way to think about it, relieve some of that pressure and just laugh.
Yeah.
And if you hit, you hit. If you miss, you miss. I think if you're operating in that realm, then fine.
You think maybe that's part of why he's Teflon when it comes to cancel culture?
Because he's mastered how to do that.
Yeah.
But, because he's made jokes about certain groups, and groups have come after him, and he's just like...
And his other celebrity friends are like, hey, man, like, I'm with you on all these things, but da-da-da-da-da. And he's like, okay. I'm making... 30 billion. Whew. I'm making like 20-30 million per Netflix special, so okay, noted. I hear your opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
sometimes that's fine.
There's a difference in that.
Yeah.
Because the joke that Kev made was more just, it's just offensive. It's not funny. It's mean. So what are some takeaways that those who are listening, because honestly, just as ambiguous as cancel culture is, I don't think we necessarily landed on any conclusive objective point.
It's so hard to, but I think what I'm trying to say is like, let's just be careful about these labels and these boogeymans we make to try to like tear down nothing.
To try to be more specific when we talk about it?
Because at the end of the day, like I think all the talk that cancel culture is doing currently is shaming people who take part in a collective moral voicing. And fundamentally, being able to voice moral opinion collectively is a feature of democracy, not a bug. And so we need to actually think about, okay, what are the real problems that are causing these pain points, and how can we work together to solve them as a society, rather than just pointing fingers and blame and shame on each other?
Is the assumption or the thought that moral collective voicing is either the norm or the larger majority of things that go on called cancel culture? Because I think those are good. I think Me Too is good. I think Church Too is good when it's accurate. That's an important part.
It's a huge part.
I think there's plenty of Me Too and Church Too stuff.
Sure.
People jumping on the train, trying to tear down character and stuff.
Sure.
But like the legitimate Me Too stuff, the legitimate Church Too stuff, the legitimate... all of those things, I think, are very good. There's so much crud out there. and this is impossible to detect because
Right.
I'm not the king of the internet. I don't have the analytics on all of the internet. But like how much moral collective voicing, people banding together to make their voices heard is like actually happening in any sort of organized fashion? Or is it people shooting out in the dark at things they don't like?
Let's
Even
say,
if that's the minority, because I feel like that might be the minority.
no, even say let's take it worst case scenario for you. Even if it's the very worst and people are just shooting off about moral judgments on things they have no background on, they're completely misinformed and they're having ill effect. My question is, what's the therefore? And the therefore can't be, well, stop collectively having a moral voice as a society,
I see.
right?
I agree.
I mean, who are you going to yield that power to? You're going to yield it to a board? You're going to yield it to a company? You're going to yield it to some government politician? No.
None of the above.
No, we can't do that. So let's fix the problems that are leading to people being misinformed. Let's fix the problems that are leading to people being vulnerable to being dogpiled. Let's look at those as the problems instead of talking about the ability of people to come together and say, hey, we thought that was wrong. That's not fundamentally a broken part of society. I think that's a good thing.
So what would you say the systemic problem is?
Well, I think a couple of things. One, we've talked a lot already. I think social media and its impact on us as people, the way we think, the way that it's filtering out the news that we get, the way that it's filtering out the sources that we see and the way we interpret those sources, such that people are forming opinions by the constant onslaught, like we've talked about before, of just a drip, drip, drip of stuff, so that you feel that there's this big tone and this is the way the world is, when you actually don't have any concrete evidence about it being one way or the other.
I hear that crap all the time.
All it is you've seen a ton of headlines. That's a problem.
Yeah, it is.
Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how social media causes that. Let's talk about how our participation maybe causes that. What can we do? How can we educate people? How can we regulate so that doesn't happen?
How can we regulate the billion and trillion dollar companies as people?
Sure, collectively,
Sure.
as we work together. So that's the thing. When we give up the power of people to work together to come to solutions, then you're leaving the power in the hands of the people who actually still have the power to cancel people, the people who actually have the power to censor, the people who actually have the power to fire. You have to be careful about that. And so that's why I'd say the second thing is to think about how can we change our thinking instead of blaming individuals. Not that we can't coach each other, not that we can't educate each other, not that we can't convict each other with the word of God. Individually, we should do that. But instead of just throwing shame at groups, let's think about how the way we run society, that's what we've chosen to do. Maybe we can make a different choice.
Oof. And I'm consider myself a pretty optimistic fellow. That seems like a tall order.
I agree. I think there's a lot of front end work. And honestly, I think that people often find themselves assuming the worst in everybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so...
Yeah, some positive intent we need.
Yeah, just to be able to say, you know, I know what scripture has to say about the condition of man prior to salvation.
That's right.
And I believe that 100%. But to say that this person can do relatively decent things,
Common
that's
grace
not
is real.
that's not a bad thing. And it's really asking the question, even if you say I'm an active member of cancel culture.
I'm a card-carrying member. I'm in the cancel culture party.
Or if there was a cancel culture spokesman or
I'm
whatever.
an ambassador from the cancel culture party.
The question, I think the ultimate, or at least to me, the overarching question is, what are you trying to accomplish?
Sure.
Like, at the start and finish of this, you canceled everybody that you tried to cancel. You had everyone adhere to the standard of morals that society had gathered together. What's the end game?
To have a monoculture of you.
Maybe.
Right. And so, and that's why I went back and said that, unfortunately, it doesn't, the standard is really not defined very well of what qualifies an individual or groups of individuals. Like it's too volatile because it's anybody could adhere to it if society agrees that this thing is moral.
Which is ironic, like
immoral.
what you said when religious subgroups both decry cancel culture and then adopt it when it suits their
right
needs. Is
That's not an objective standard.
Yeah.
It can't be objective.
Yeah, and that's where it's tough, right? Because we live in a pluralistic society, and everyone has standards of morality. Whether you believe in an absolute morality like we do, or you believe in a relative morality, either way, you have a standard of morality. And there is a time when people do things that cross that line.
Mm-hmm.
And people do things that aren't okay, and we should be able to say it's not okay. So I think that's what's tough about it, is some of this is trying to figure out life together in a pluralistic society when we have very different ideas of moral standards. But yeah, you're right. Like, we have to come back to, what does it mean to value a human life fully, both in what we don't allow, because that devalues a human life,
Mm-hmm.
and in the way we don't allow that, because if we disallow certain speech a certain way, that also could devalue a human life. So we have to be careful.
word. Well, that's
Absolutely.
that's a good button for the beginning of this discussion. I think this is a complex and like not even complex, but like just a frustrating issue, because it's so amorphous, and any sort of solution is so seemingly out of grasp, just because like we're in a representative government, but like most of our representatives don't actually have our interest at heart.
I'm offended by that. You're canceled.
Yeah.
Yo.
I was like, you see got something in the chamber. Oh, it's a sweet. Well, I'm offended by your burn of me, so now you owe me an apology, apparently.
I'm sorry. I was wrong. I hurt you.
Okay, well, you can host the Oscars
Now you can host the Oscars.
So, we want to hear from you guys. What did you think? What did you agree with, disagree with? But really, like, what are your thoughts? Cancel culture is a complex and strange thing. We would love to hear from you as we go ahead. What if there is something particular? What should we follow up with? Maybe on a toss-up or something.
Yeah.
Feel free to send us an email at thesubstancepod@gmail.com, or give us a call on the Substance Hotline, Trevor, at
913-703-3883.
Yeah, give us a call there. Keep it around 60 seconds. Introduce yourself. Let us know where you're from, and give us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. And obviously, we're on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, The Substance Pod, and all that, and The Substance Podcast on Facebook.
And we really appreciate you guys' support. So if you want to know how to support us, there's a few ways to do that. First, you can subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, or we also have our videos up on YouTube. So we'd love a subscription. We would also love a rating, 5-star rating ideally. And if not,
let us know what we can do to get that 5-star.
Yeah, let us know what we can
We'll
do
work
to get
for
that.
it.
For sure.
Leave your comments, especially on social media platforms. Definitely leave your comments, and there ideally we would want to have the most conversation. And then if you would want to bless us financially, you can send us money on CashApp. That is $thesubstancepod.
Nice. All right, guys. Well, fun conversation as always with you listeners. Thanks again for showing up, and we'll see you next time
On The Substance. You know what I'm saying? You chuckled.
Not for real.
Okay, no.
I'm laughing at you.
Cut that,
laughing at you,
cut
man.
that
Yeah.
whole part out. No, genuinely. Maybe, yeah. Not. Okay, hold on. Something kept saying, I'm going to reset.